Hello there, Romans here and welcome to my next music review. Today it's going to be Black Country Communion BCCIV.
Music review. Music review.
Black Country Communion is one of the most famous supergroups in the last decade, and it consists of a living legend, Glenn Hughes, one of the best blues guitar players, Joe Bonamassa, Derek Sherinian, not sure about the pronunciation, keyboard player formerly known of Dream Theater, and of course Jason Bonham, who is the son of the late John Bonham from Led Zeppelin. I'm a huge fan of Black Country Communion and Glenn Hughes as well. I have listened to most of the stuff that Glenn Hughes has released, and even when it comes to Black Country Communion, he's probably the lead songwriter in the band. The new album, BCCIV or BCCIV, is a sort of an exception because based on what I've read, all the songs were 100% collaboration between Joe Bonamassa and Glenn Hughes. Something that happened on the first three albums as well, but there were many songs that Glenn wrote alone. I think Glenn Hughes is one of the most interesting people in music. He became famous back in the 70s when he joined Deep Purple as a bass player and one of the two lead singers along with David Coverdale. And they were one of the first bands to combine hard rock music with funk and soul. And it's quite interesting that when he was in his prime, so late 70s and throughout the 80s, he hadn't released way too many records. It was because he was battling addiction and drugs. And it was in the early 90s when he got back on his feet. His first solo records in the 90s were quite experimental in a way that pretty much almost every record was different from the other one. And then since 1999's The Way It Is, he pretty much found his own way how to do music, and he has been going that way ever since. In the last 20 years he pretty much released a record. And in the last 20 years he pretty much released almost... And in the last 20 years it seems like he pretty much released one record per year. And those records were much less different from each other than those before. So I think that Glenn Hughes fans pretty much know what to expect from him. I always preferred him in bands like Deep Purple, Hughes Thrall, Hughes Turner Project. The second album is a monster record. Of course, Black Country Communion and California Breed, but also his solo records were very good. Because his music in the last 20 years hasn't really changed that much, sometimes it happened that the music got a little repetitive. Like for example, if you listen to second Black Country Communion's album and the first track, The Outsider, it has exactly the same riff as the song Picking Up the Pieces from his 1994's From Now On record. So as I said, his music has been pretty much the same in the last 20 years, but I was very excited when he released his new solo record last year called Resonate, which was his first solo album after 8 years. And that record was a little different from the previous ones because it was heavier, darker, and I really liked that he used D-drop tuning in some tracks. And it reminded me of his 1996 Addiction album. And when Black Country Communion announced a comeback last year, I got super excited, and when they announced a new album I got even more excited. Now the main difference between Black Country Communion and Glenn Hughes is that Glenn Hughes' music is more reminiscent of his Deep Purple era, hard rock combined with funk and soul, whereas Black Country Communion seemed to be a sort of a continuum of Led Zeppelin's legacy from the 70s. I don't really think they are very secretive about that, as well as Jason Bonham, the drummer from the band, is the son of the late John Bonham from the Led Zeppelin. So I've heard the new album 8 times as of now, so let's talk about the new album for a while. So the very first track on the album is called Collide, and this is a pretty classical 70s riff kind of song that has that Led Zeppelin vibe. It is pretty much a song you would expect from Black Country Communion, and the second track, called Over My Head, is a track that I would probably expect from Glenn Hughes' solo albums. Now the third song is called The Last Song for My Resting Place, and there is one thing that Glenn Hughes said some time ago. He wanted each Black Country Communion album to be a little different from each other, and I think that their first three albums pretty much had certain little details that made them different from each other, and this is the song that makes this album different. Interesting thing about Black Country Communion is that it's actually two lead singers kind of band, similarly to Deep Purple. So the guitar player John Bonamassa, who is also a great singer, also shares lead vocals with Glenn. Of course, Glenn is more of a lead singer as he sings most of the songs, but John sings as well, and this is one of the songs that he sings. And I really like the violin in the song. It gives the whole song a very American folk feeling, something that was kind of typical with Led Zeppelin, that folk influence, but it really makes this song distinctive. There is one thing I couldn't help though, and it's when there's a run for the chorus. Every time the chorus was about to happen, I was expecting the Audio Slaves Like a Stone chorus. I don't know why, maybe you'll have the same feeling when you listen to the song. The fourth track, called Sway, is one of the best tracks of the album. It's got a very psychedelic 70s riff, and then there is a Led Zeppelin's Kashmir kind of vibe. The other song, The Cove, has Black Sabbath slow doom riff, and then the song transforms into a blues/pop kind of song. It's a very interesting matchup. The song The Crow is probably most reminiscent of Deep Purple, and what I really like about this song is a bass guitar solo. Now, I've seen Glenn live in February this year. I always considered him to be a decent bass player, and he also had a bass solo at that gig, and I was like, wow, he's a great bass player, why doesn't he include that more often in songs? Another song called Wanderlust is probably my most favorite track of the album. It starts with a piano riff that is like 70s pop rock kind of riff, and it reminded me of his From Now On solo album from 1994, which is probably his most melodic solo album, as most of his work is groove based, but this was a very melodic album. It maybe reminded me Kansas of 70s at some points. This is exactly how great hard rock songs should be made. Another two songs, The Love Remains and Awake, are relatively typical songs for Black Country Communion, but there is just something about them that makes them sound very fresh. And the album ends with a bluesy ballad called When the Morning Comes. So I think that generally the songwriting is very good. So this is pretty much what you'd expect from Black Country Communion and Glenn Hughes. But there are little details that make this album different, and I really like them a lot. The production is of course great. The thing I love about this band, and especially about Glenn, that this is not just some nostalgia thing, and Glenn Hughes is not kind of a musician like 60s, 70s musicians playing on a gig and people going like, oh, you should have seen him in his prime. No, the guy is still in his prime. I don't understand how he can sing so well. Glenn Hughes is definitely the eighth wonder of the world for me, and of course if you listen to this record and you listen to anything from the early 90s, his voice is very different, but not his technique, not his range, and not his aggression. It's just a tone that's a little different, but Glenn Hughes is just such a fantastic singer. And you know, if you really look at the last 20 years, that he released pretty much a record per year, and when it comes to his live performances, he usually sticks to the classics, like he plays some Deep Purple stuff, and he overlooks most of his solo records. You may wonder, why does he keep doing more and more records? But it's because it's great, you know, it's something that makes him who he is. I think that Black Country Communion is also a band with a very typical sound and music, and I think we should be lucky for musicians like this who do this decent classic rock music. There aren't many bands like that. So I decided to give this album 8 points out of 10. It's a very...
Only 8?
It's a very good album. Now, when I was listening to this album, like first 5 or 6 times, I was completely excited from this album. After a while you will get certain heard it before within Glenn Hughes' discography kind of syndrome or kind of feeling. But it's okay, you know, it's a very good album. I'm very sorry that they will only support this album with 2 gigs. I would really like to see them on a tour. I would recommend this. If you like Glenn Hughes, if you like Black Country Communion, there's no doubt you will love this album. In Slovak, the name of this record is Komunita Čiernej krajiny 4. Okay, so I hope you liked this review. If you did, don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe. And if you have listened to this record already, you can leave a comment in the comment section below, or if you have listened to any of the Glenn Hughes' records or anything regarding the guys from the band, you can share it. I'll be very excited to hear your thoughts and your opinions. Thanks for watching. And if there are any bloopers, enjoy them. On to my next music review. Today it's Black Country Communion.
Today is going to be new.
Really?
That's my boy.
And when it comes to Black Country Communion, Glenn Hughes is... Again, honey, why? Why? Why always? Okay. Once again, ow. But of course, guys, this is the most beautiful women in the world.
I don't know.